There is obviously a process, uneven, difficult, of post-conflict transition underway at this time. And for all of the victims from all of the sides, it is very, very challenging and very, very problematic. So we cannot leave out the victims of state killings or the victims of collusion. And particularly when there is, if I can use this term, such an easy case. 11 people were killed by the British Army in a neighbourhood. And then 5 or 6 months later, 5 other people were killed. The very same regiment and maybe the same soldiers have already been found responsible for killings in Derry. So it's a straightforward case. It isn't, it isn't one in which you will have to chase an awful lot. Even what appears to be a first trial by the local Catholic Church has found what appears to be additional pieces of information which support the family's case.
How important do you think the Catholic Church is implicated in this?
Well, I wouldn't single the Catholic Church out above and beyond anyone else. I think anyone who has any information whatsoever should bring it forward. It has always struck me that the fact that 2 priests were killed is quite unique, and that the Catholic Church obviously has a responsibility to try and uncover the truth behind the killing of those 2 men who were months apart administering last rites to people who were either wounded or seriously injured. In other words, they were doing their priestly duties, and in both cases signalled that in Father Mullen's case, I think he actually had a white or some sort of emblem to let the powers know, or to let the British Army know that he was about peace business.
What role would you envision for the IRA in some kind of commission around these? Because the IRA were active on the ground at the time. Do they have a role to play?
Well, I think all combatant forces, the IRA has left the stage now, but I mean, I was in Ballymurphy during these parades. I was in West Belfast during these parades. I'm quite happy to go forward and to play whatever positive role I can play in getting the truth on these matters. But there's no question, you see, in the Ballymurphy killings of these people being killed in crossfire. There's no question. There's no one suggesting, even in the decades since then, there's never been a suggestion that any of these people were killed as a result of crossfire, or indeed there's never been any serious suggestion, as happened in Derry, that they were armed or engaged in any armed activity.
If the Catholic Church has this information, why do you think it's taken so long to uncover it? And if they have this information there in their file, should it not have been passed on to police long ago?
Well, that's a question you'll have to put to the Catholic Church. I think it's a good question. I considered that myself, but I decided I wanted the focus to be on the positive element of all of this, that there's another piece of the jigsaw. And for families who are involved in campaigning, from whatever perspective, whether they're campaigning for justice from the IRA or whether they're campaigning for justice from the British, it's very, very important that families have hope and have a sense of being able to make some progress in all of this.
How much confidence do you have in how it's actually delivering?
None whatsoever. First of all, my thoughts are with the Armstrong family. They're a family who I've met. The IRA have always denied involvement in the killing of Charlie Armstrong. I myself see no reason, if they did kill him, why they wouldn't admit it. They have admitted killing these other people who were secretly buried. All I can tell you is that there was a grave injustice done, and that I and others in Sinn Féin have been working very, very diligently and for some long time to try and recover the remains, and that in its time and this is not to excuse what it did, because what it did was wrong, but in its time the IRA also actively worked to recover these remains, and the proof of all of that lies with the forensic expert who has said that the IRA's engagement with it was in a spirit of cooperation and reconciliation, and they're trying to help in every way that they can. He went on to say, I'm absolutely convinced that the IRA are doing everything they can to assist. The support we've had from them has been absolutely 100% from day one. He went on to say also that probably in some cases I think that the people directly involved have died. You're reviewing events that took place 30 years ago. Memories fade, locations change, and that's one of the things that we've identified pretty rapidly, that the sites have changed dramatically. Now, there are other people whose bodies are missing and other families who need closure, and I hope that the Armstrong family have closure. I can tell you that we haven't stopped working with the Commission for 1 week over many years now, and all the time back and forth privately and diligently, forensically trying to piece together and to work with the Commission to try and ensure that these other families have the closure that they deserve, and that the great injustice done by them is repaired if that's possible, or certainly is addressed, and that they can have Christian burials and graves to visit.
What do you think happened? What do you think happened to Charlie Armstrong? Do you have a...
I don't know, and I'm not prepared to speculate.
But as you said you're quite content or satisfied with the IRA's statement of involvement in this film?
Well, there's no evidence to suggest that the IRA was involved, and you know, it may be an issue of secondary importance. You know, the fact is that this man was killed, and his remains were buried. Whoever did it, at least now there is the hope that the family, and particularly his widow Kathleen, will have her wish decades later to be able to bury her husband and to visit a grave.
So are you 100% confident the IRA had involved?
Well, I see no reason if they were, and they have already acknowledged these other killings, they've already acknowledged the injustice of these burials, and they, as the Commission expert has said, have worked diligently with him to try and recover those remains. In other words, there's not just acknowledgement, there's contrition over what occurred. I see no reason why they wouldn't admit.
Do you think there might have been Republican involvement or rogue elements of the IRA on sanctions?
Well, I'm not going to speculate about that, because I have heard all sorts of theories, and I spent some considerable time trying to piece together what occurred. So all I could do is be speculative, and I'm not prepared to do that. When the IRA made its statement acknowledging its involvement in the killings of the people who they'd secretly buried, I thought the remains would have been recovered much more quickly. And it is my conviction that when the locations were given, that they were given honestly and that they were accurate. Now, as the expert says, the terrain has changed, people directly involved may have died. So what has protracted the whole process hasn't been a reluctance by Republicans to help, but has just been the magnitude of the task facing people to go on to mostly remote spots 30 years in some cases after the killing. So I don't want to falsely raise the hopes of other families, but all I can do, and I meet these families, even, you know, some of them are from Republican backgrounds, some of them are Republican families, some of them are constituents of mine, I meet them even socially. All I can do is assure them that we will continue to work with the Commission, and I would appeal to anyone who has any information whatsoever to bring it forward, to me, to Sinn Fein, to the PSNI, to An Garda Síochána, to the families, to the Commission itself, and we will persist until we have totally exhausted, and hopefully until we have recovered all of the remains.